everyone. I am Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker and the host of this Daisy Jones and the Six Rewatch podcast. Now, when I speak, my topic is something I call Take the Doughnut, which is another way to say Carpe Diem. And it's all about going after the things you want in life. Something that I wanted to do this year was rewatch the show Daisy Jones and the Six, but this time talk about it with other people. And I am so lucky. I'm getting a chance to talk with people who worked on the show about the show. And before I introduce today's guest, just a quick housekeeping item. If you haven't seen the whole show all the way through, these interviews could have spoilers in them. We could mention any detail that comes up in any episode, especially and especially with a podcast and a guest like this. So just know that up front. If you haven't seen the show all the way through, maybe go binge it real quick right now and come back. But if you're happy to forge ahead, I'm so excited to welcome my guest for today, who is Andi Brittan, who is a set decorator for 8 episodes of the show. Welcome.
Thank you. How
I
you?
am so excited to talk with you. I know we are dusting off the memories of working on this show a couple years ago, but we can see what comes out of this conversation.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Obviously there are more specific details to get into on your work, but I think we need to start where I'm sort of starting with everybody, which is how did you get connected with this show to begin with?
I actually got connected through a colleague of mine, Lisa Clark, who was the key set decorator on this show, which was supposed to shoot entirely in Los Angeles. And I remember seeing her at a meeting one night and asked her what she was working on. And she said Daisy Jones and the Six. And I was like, oh, really? How did you get that job? That's an amazing job. I read the book, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, good luck, have fun. And then uh, that was just, I think, before COVID. And then COVID happened and the show got pushed. And I was working on something else and I got a call from her one day saying, I don't know if you'll do this, but can you come in as an assistant set decorator in LA for 2 weeks? I was like, yes, of course, of course. So 2 weeks turned into like 2 months on and off in Los Angeles, and then turned into another 5 months in New Orleans, where I keyed the show. So Lisa Clark was the key set decorator in Los Angeles, and then when I went to New Orleans, I was the key set decorator.
Wow, it pays to tell somebody you read the book.
Oh yeah. Also, it's nice when it's a colleague, we share information and if there's an opportunity for somebody else that's interested, then we share it with each other.
It's amazing when in your industry, you say yes to something and then it can morph and it can evolve. It must be hard to manage expectations around what you think a job is going to be when something can start as a 2 week job and turn into something like that time commitment.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to manage expectations. And at the time we were still in COVID, but we were coming out of it, and it was the end of 2021. And it was when streaming was going at full tilt, and they decided we had to make a lot of quantity. And so there was all the books. It's a union show. All the books were full. Basically, we all our crew, everybody was working, which was really lucky at the time. But we had to hire permit people, and which often are new. So it's hard to manage expectations when you have newer crew with you. Also, um, schedule wise and budget wise, there are certain expectations that we do it no matter what. We get it done in time. And so, we try to manage those and manage the budget with the producers as well.
Hmm. I did have a chance to speak with Lisa Clark a bit about the big picture of what set decoration involves. So we've
Mm-hmm.
kind of got like the ABCs of set decoration, but for you, um, what did your specific job entail, especially when you think about the division of labor?
So actually, when I was helping Lisa in Los Angeles, I was we basically, an assistant set decorator is the same as a set decorator. We do exactly the same job. The only thing is that we are kind of answerable to the key set decorators. So she will manage the sets and approve them. And she's the person who speaks to the producers directly, controls the budget, and at that point, so I would come in and I would control the budget for the set, but she would say, "Oh, here, this is what you have," and then I would go out. I didn't have a buyer at that time, so I did it myself, which was actually kind of fun, and I would just, go out, shop the set, and then I'd give her a board of like, oh, this is what I'm doing, and she'd look at it and approve it or give her opinion or options, and and that's the way we did it. And then when we went to New Orleans, I was the one that was the key set decorator and in charge of the budget and would speak to the producers, and I had assistant set decorators who I was then kind of supervising, and buyers. So that's how it works. But really, the job of an assistant set decorator or an additional set decorator is the same. You're just not the head of department that is interacting with other departments and producers.
Hmm. So, okay, you start off for you're given sort of I'm come on board for 2 weeks. When was that in the process? Like compared to when Lisa had started, how far in was she by the time you were brought in?
I think Lisa might have been about 6 months
Okay.
in. Yeah, quite a bit. Um, I can't remember when I asked her the question. It might have been May, and then I started with her in September 2021.
So, what does prep look like for you then, especially knowing that somebody else did hit the ground running already? And so you need to prep, but you also need to absorb what they've been doing. What does that process look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, you're coming into a show that's a period show set in the 60s and 70s, um, with not a lot of prep time. Uh, you know, it was like, here are two hotel rooms. This is the style. This is the look. We've started shopping it already. Here's the relevant script pages, and off you go. So it helps, and as a set decorator, it helps to have a certain knowledge of history of furniture and decoration, right? So, I mean, you can't know it all, but so when you get put into situations like that, when there isn't a lot of prep, at least I mean, you can recognize what is the right furnishings, what are the right what's the right lighting, the right toaster, the right, those kind of things, drapery, etc. Um, but it did prove pretty tough because I didn't get a lot of prep. I was thrown in, also hit the ground running. We always keep files on a Dropbox. It was enormous. And there were lots of reference photos in there, but I didn't have very much time to look at everything. So it's just based on my knowledge and, here, look, this is what we want. And then, I go and execute the plan. I'd also helped that I grew up in the 70s.
Yeah, you had some frame of reference. I'm curious in your personal experience, you said that you had read the book.
Yeah.
And when you read a book like this, with the job that you do, are you envisioning what the spaces look like that are being described in the book? So maybe that was almost something that was already in your head.
For sure. I mean, I read that book maybe 3 or 4 years before the show. I think before it was optioned by, Hello Sunshine. So, but yeah, I mean, generally when one reads a book or when I read a book, I certainly, imagine what the surroundings and the environment and what it's going to look like. And
Hmm.
also, if I have, if I understand like the history of Laurel Canyon and the music scene in those 2 decades, then that helps inform the visuals I have when reading the book as well. And they
Hmm.
weren't that different, honestly, from the film, you know.
Yeah.
Although Daisy's a little more. she's a little bit more rebellious and wild in her teenage years in the book, and the show just kind of glossed over that a little bit.
Yeah, it's really rolled up into one episode, that part of her life.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the specific spaces that were part of your purview. So, well, first of all, one of the things that you had mentioned to me was that you were responsible for the theater, the arena, the stadium shows in New Orleans. What did this entail for you? Especially like if I watch it on screen, um, it looks like just a stage, right? And you forget that people are like putting everything there. So what actually is involved in your job for these theater these stadium shows?
Well, I mean, this is the part where you definitely have to do research because, I mean, maybe growing up in the 70s or having an idea of furnishings is very different to having ideas of or having knowledge of all the technical stuff, the mixing boards and the speakers and the microphones and all sorts of things like that. And they were all empty sets. They were all empty theaters or Chicago Field was an empty stadium in New Orleans, and it was an enormous set. So I was very lucky to have a musical supervisor with me, specifically with set dressing, who had toured with Alice Cooper. And so he had incredible knowledge of what the right specific items were for, which decade, for which year. And so he helped me a lot with the research and saying, okay, this is correct, that's correct. And then I shopped it at various prop houses, History for Hire in Los Angeles, and museums around the New Orleans. Being a music town, you would expect it to have a lot more, but it didn't. So we were getting mixing boards and speakers from the Texas Broadcast Museum and having them shipped into LA. But it has to look right. So you also have to have the time in order to do that, to do the research and then to find it, because it's not like you can pop into a store and there it all is. So it's it was a group effort, but I definitely relied on his name's Ron for help in the specifics of what models, what mixing boards, and he'd say, oh, yes, back in that day, it was a 16 channel mixing board, and that's a
Wow.
26 channel, so that won't work, so that was really incredibly helpful. Um, Now, when it came to the actual instruments, that's props. I don't know if Lisa told you. So the band playing is something that the prop master and there's a music supervisor on set that they will do the actual instruments. So we really do the background. So we would do the mixing boards and the speakers and backstage and the floor monitors, etc., etc.
Okay, that's a really helpful distinction. And then you had mentioned you also, like when we think about the whole last episode, well, not the whole last episode, but most of the last episode, we're going to see one performance at Soldier Field in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And we do see the stage, but we also see a backstage area, we see a green room. And what went into this for you?
It really, the on-stage element was amazing because the art department and Jessica Kender, who's the production designer, found a company that actually still had scaffolding from that period. And so they were hired to come and build the sets. But she also had this reference of the wall of sound, which is a reference, I think, from the Grateful Dead, and it's literally an entire wall of speakers, and we had to. I mean, it's not possible to get them, so we bought the separate components and this and the oh my god, I can't remember what they're called now. I'll remember in a bit. But we bought all the components and then sent it out to a manufacturer to build us fake speakers, basically because real speakers would also be incredibly heavy. And because really it was, you were just seeing the background behind the band. So that was fun, and together we designed the speakers, and we counted how many on each level of scaffolding, and then when it came time to delivery, the set dressers actually put it up on the scaffolding, which is really what happens in an actual event. It's just event people. This part, it was my crew. And then, of course, because you see the backstage as well, we had to add all the elements that come out of the back of the speakers. So the power and any connections that would, be attached, because you see it from the back. So it all had to look incredibly real. All the, wiring had to look right. And it was, I really don't remember, but we must have had 50 to 75 speakers, like on 3 levels or 4 levels. Yeah. So that was fun. And then the backstage areas, we had again reference photos, and the sound mixer that sits on the side had his own little section, and that was decorated with some beer bottles and cigarettes, and he'd be reading a book, and he had a cabinet that he keeps all his personal items in. And then we had to dress, obviously, the around the back of the stage with with um with all the boxes. Wow, I've forgotten the name. I'll remember. um oh my god, the boxes, or that all the musical instruments would have come in.
Okay, like cases or
Yeah, can't believe I can't remember the word. I'm getting old. um I'll remember it sometime, but it's basically to show the reality, right? So what would have happened is the crew of Daisy Jones would have come in with all road cases.
row
There you go.
cases. Hmm.
Yeah. So they would have come in with all these road cases of lighting and instruments and their soundboard, etc., etc., unpack it, and then the road boxes end up around the stage. So backstage, behind the cyc, which was designed by Jessica Kender, and on the sides as well. And then there's that scene behind the cyc at the end where they kiss, and so we did, that it was constant, actually, flipping around of road boxes, because you often have to cheat things in. We had to do lighting back there. The electric department did all the stage lighting on the stage. And it was a huge project, and we had lots of mishaps and issues. And one of them was, one of the main actors got COVID. So we had about a 5 or 6 day prep, and then the film company rents the location for only a certain amount of days. And then we've gone and we've spent 5 days dressing the stadium, and lead actor gets sick, and so we can't shoot. So we have to, and then there's this whole thing, well, do we need to take it all down and then build it all up again? And how much, then all the costs come into mind. And so we had to extend the locations and kept it longer. And then, like 3 or 4 days into it, we have a twister in New Orleans
Oh my
randomly.
gosh.
I mean, in Hurricane Place, we have a tornado, and it basically rips off the top of the stage, like only in a corner. But there you go. So we had to, that had to be repaired before we started shooting again. And so there were a few things. It was a very challenging shoot. It was very challenging, and a lot of it was at night as well. And the you have to have some control of the environment, which you generally don't have if you're outdoors. And but yeah, it was we had a it was interesting times in during this tornado. We had selected some furniture from retailers around New Orleans. And my buyer came to me one day and she said to me, Andy, do you remember the set of garden furniture that you chose for Marlene Dunn's house? And I was like, oh, yes, those lovely little pieces. And she was like, yeah, they are no longer there because the store that stocked them was no longer there as well.
Because of the
So,
tornado.
yeah, yeah. So it was really, we were dealing with a lot of environmental elements as well as
Wow.
others. I also did the green room, which actually was an incredibly fun set behind Soldier Field, and took a bit of artistic license here because when you look at the research back then and you see David Bowie sitting in his makeup room or Elton John, it's literally a mirror and some folding chairs, and it's down in a basement basically. They don't really have this kind of entourage thing, but because Daisy Jones and the Six had reached the pinnacle of their performance career, we had to kind of show that they had gone from basements into much better places. So we had three makeup tables and a sofa to sit in, and a whole craft service table, and a whole liquor table with booze and beer and ashtrays, and then again the road boxes and musical instruments. And it was really one of the most fun sets to do because it was, quintessential 70s. Um, so that was a lot of fun for me because a lot of the hotel rooms, for example, that I did in New Orleans were, of different styles. They weren't really necessarily 70s, or like the Miami hotel room was like 70s Miami, you know, or the hotel they stay in at the end was, kind of turn of the century gilded age, style where everything was very lavish and all the upholstery matches the drapes and so well, that was fun. The 70s sets that I got to do were really fun for me.
Oh my goodness, this is absolutely fascinating. And this is why you have to have these conversations because the tornado hasn't come up at all yet in my conversations with people. And that's a huge deal. It damaged the set you were
Yeah,
working on.
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And when
Um,
you're running behind schedule already, because you really have to move fast. You have to, it's coming up. You got to find these things, they've got to be right. And, when you finally found them, you're like, great, check. And then when they get blown away, it's a day or two before you're shooting, and then you've got to go out again. And let me just say, I did not do this alone. I had an incredible team. I also had an additional set decorator, I had an assistant set decorator, and I had 2 to 3 buyers, which we needed. And so, but it was still with that help, it was still really difficult to deal with these things. And this is what we do a lot as set decorators is we troubleshoot because something always happens.
hmm. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Well, okay. Let's talk about another concert set, festival set. The Diamond Head Festival is so interesting to see on screen. And actually, when I was doing the deep dive of that episode, I was remarking about how it's just like a concert in the middle of no, it's like creating something out of absolutely nothing. And it's hard to even imagine how something like that could be functional in the real world. So I know that you needed to do the set decoration for this and the bus that we see going into that space. What did that involve for you?
Well, first of all, it was an empty basically desert space. And it was a little bit weird for me because Diamond Head concert, the actual Diamond Head concert in that era was in Hawaii, where everything's so lush and green. And so it was another last minute. I was off. I'd done my hotel rooms, and Lisa called me one day and she said, this enormous, enormous set that we had specifically scheduled at the end of the schedule has just been moved up to next week. Can you come in and do the set? I was like, oh, and then I saw the location. I was like, well, are we bringing in greens? This isn't, Diamond Head, but, again, artistic license. But it was a completely empty field. And so our construction department constructed the stage, which was about 30 feet off the ground. And then we, again, decorated it, the carpet under the drums and put all the speakers up on the side. And that was interesting because that backstage we did, and all the green rooms were tents, like circus tents, and we we had, I think, 4 or 5, and they were beautiful period tents that we had gotten, and we were doing really well, and we set them up, and like first day, tents were up, we were ready to go. We were going to go and dress, the field, because we needed tents and teepees and all sorts of things like that. And I got a call coming into location from my lead man in the morning saying, oh, there's 30-mile-an-hour winds here. We can't work, And I was like, okay, just wait for me to get there. And when I got there, it was insane. It's very unsafe to send people up. We were working on condors, we were working on scissor lifts, we were working on ladders, and it was very unsafe. Not to mention, these were period tents and very valuable tents. So the company that rented to us were like, we have to put those tents back on the ground because they're just going to get destroyed. So we had to take the entire backstage down again, all the tents down, which meant that, there was one area which was the green room again, which we had done the interior of the tent with all this beautiful fabric, and we had to take the whole thing down. And then we were like, okay, well, we've had this weather event. They're gonna push for 2 days at least. Nope. And we're like, we are shooting on Sunday. And so we had to come back the next day. We had to get everything up. We were set dressing that set up until they started shooting it. And it was, again, it was, quintessential. I think Diamond Head at that point, I don't know if it was early 70s or late 60s. But we set up all the buses around and the furniture, and then their tour bus, which was the most amazing fun for me. We shopped it with all sorts of fabric and lighting and kind of organic stuff. Made it a little kind of hippie-ish in a way, little bit based on the Merry Pranksters bus with Ken Kesey, can't remember his name, Ken Kesey. And I had a draper come in, and we just had bolts and bolts and bolts of fabric that I had chosen, and blankets and all sorts of things that we draped over the seats, and lighting and macrame wall hangings on the windows. And again, our draper did an incredible job of draping the inside of the bus and ceilings, and set dressers and I did all the lighting and the macrame. And right on the back window of this bus, I'd found this kind of quilted fabric that was an antique fabric that was beautiful. It was because it was kind of diamond shaped with negative spaces. So one of the requirements that our DP said was like, or everything we hang on the window has to have some sort of translucency to it. So we have to kind of be able to see inside the bus from the outside and outside from the inside. So we had to be very specific with our fabric and the textiles that we used. That textile appeared in every frame. It was beautiful. Even there's a photo, marketing photo with them sitting in the bus. And we wrapped the bus one day, and they were like, "Okay, we're coming to the bus. We're coming back. Keep everything. Keep everything." And somehow this quilt got lost. And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll just look at the dailies and see how much of it we saw." And it's just here, right behind
It's
everybody's head.
always there.
And it's 24 hours before we start shooting it or reshooting it. And I called up Universal Studios drapery department, which is where I rented this item from, and I said, "Can you make me something like that? And you've got 12 hours. Can you remake this item?" And they did it in 12 hours, and it was an incredibly, it was a patchwork quilt. So it was amazing. I mean, those seamstresses at Universal Studios are fantastic. So I had it on the day, ready to go. Nobody noticed. It was pretty much identical, and one of my favorite sets, despite that, because it was just rich and warm and layered and textured, and it was really the period before they got their really big buses. It was a school bus, and so we could really have fun with it.
Yeah.
I loved it.
We
Yeah.
are getting stories from you, Andy, and I'm loving this. You had mentioned a bit about the hotel rooms in Miami and Chicago, and I wanted to get your perspective on this because I we see hotel rooms throughout the series, especially because the Dunn brothers do a tour earlier in the series. So something that I've been reflecting on in the deep dives is what does evolution look like for these people? Because, they start out, they're new artists, they're new performers. They have to figure out what their style is, then they gel as a band, and then they gel with Daisy. And so by the time we're seeing those final episodes, they've really, even though they haven't been together that long in the show, we really need to feel like they've come a long way. So when you're thinking about decorating those sets, is that something that's factoring in for you? How much, when you're thinking about those hotel rooms, are you thinking about how far have these people progressed? Are you thinking about, I need to make these rooms feel different for different cities? Are you thinking I need something to tie it together? What's the sort of North Star for you?
It's all of those things. I mean, we have to show, because sets tell the story as well. The set dressing tells the story, and so you have to be able to, because as they develop, like you say, and they start to become famous and well known, and they move from studios to eventually a giant stadium, the hotels and motel rooms they stayed in had to reflect that part, that their growth from a tiny little band to a stadium band. And so in the beginning, I did some hotel rooms in Los Angeles. I did the Santa Fe motel room that Billy ends up in, and they have to go and get him. And that was kind of really, motel in the middle of the desert, no frills, really very, very simple and Santa Fe style. And then as they kind of progressed, the rooms got nicer and more lush and more detailed, and like progressed to rooms with beautiful wallpaper and matching drapery. And we had this wonderful set which was supposed to be on the Sunset Strip, which was pure 70s. Because what we also tried to maintain in this show was a palette that was the like earth tones more than when you think of the 70s and you think of bright orange and all like that, those graphic elements. We kind of toned it down more, and it was more, oranges and browns and ochres, etc. So it was really also hard to stop yourself from like going out and seeing this incredible 70s chair and being like, oh my God, I really want to use that, but I can't because, it's just not the palette and it's not the style. Um, so we stayed within the palette as the hotel rooms, as they made their way from really nothing all the way up to the end. So when we're making the break from when they start to travel to theaters and arenas, then the hotel rooms really get more opulent, larger. The textiles are much more luxurious, and we used a lot of texture and pattern, and a lot of things had to be custom made. Whereas, with motels and hotels, a lot of stuff that's kind of off the shelf, a lot of that set dressing. And we hoped to portray that, that ascension, if you will, into the ranks, so that when they are finally in Chicago, that hotel is like the Ritz at that point. So it's and we basically fabricated everything in that room. It was a built set. There were very few. Well, we had the two of the biggest hotel room sets, which was Miami and actually I can't remember the name of the hotel at the end. Sorry, but
Mm-hmm.
they were all stage sets. They were all constructed.
Mm.
And then the smallest sets in Los Angeles, which were the motel rooms and the little hotel rooms, and there was the hotel room on the Sunset Strip that was very 70s looking, where you don't really see it in the movie because it's a bit graphic, but where Daisy actually gets assaulted. And so that actually was a much more saturated 70s, yellows and browns and oranges, and was like borderline cool. Like we
Mm-hmm.
always wanted to keep it from being too cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's we didn't want it to look like 70s cool.
Mm.
Also because it's at that point it was Los Angeles, and it was kind of the Taverns, Laurel Canyon scenes are very, it's like the mamas and papas and Joni Mitchell, and when we use them as research, the colors aren't those 70s like trendy fun things that are being reinvented nowadays as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, the Miami hotel room was a lot of fun. It was The design was fantastic, and we got to do a little Miami deco. So that was another thing. We had a range, So even though it was the 70s, nothing exists in a vacuum, right? I mean, even when you look around today, so it's, not every hotel room you walk in is styled, in a contemporary style. We still have hotel rooms that reflect traditional environments. So that was the fun part, is that we were in the 60s, or we were in the 70s by that point. And the style still had to be 70s or further back. Um, but it could be different. Hence the deco in Miami, which makes complete sense. And it was all, Miami deco, which is the pinks and the blues and all those soft colors. Um, that was one of my favorite hotel sets, and we had to construct. Remember, we get fixated as set decorators on the tiniest little things, and I had a bedspread made for that hotel room and it's the one that Daisy jumps on with her husband. And I had this thing made in Los Angeles and shipped to New Orleans, and it arrived and it looked like the mixture between a bedspread and a duvet. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I sent it back for kind of reconstruction, but it's still never really made. Uh, it was not what I wanted. And I was standing on set, and my buyer Christine was next to me, and I said to her, "Look, that bloody bedspread! It's driving me crazy." And she turned around and she said, "Well, Andy, just think about the fact that Elvis Presley's granddaughter is jumping up and down on that bedspread." I was like, "Oh, okay. But every time I see photographs, and now I'm going to draw everybody's attention to this, I should never have said this, but every time I see it, I just get annoyed. Um,
Well, but there's a little bit of redemption in being able to call it out here, I feel like, it wasn't the vision. So
yeah.
there's something to be said for that. Actually, now that we're on Daisy, you worked on Daisy's room in Chateau Marmont as well, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What goes into that, especially knowing that Chateau Marmont is a real place that existed during that time? Like, what was the process for putting that together?
So that also had to be researched because Chateau Marmont, uh, I don't know, I'll just say it for everybody, is a very fancy, luxurious place where actors go nowadays. It was like that back then, but it was more like a flop house. So it was more like the Chelsea Hotel in New York where Bob Dylan stayed. So it wasn't a fancy place at all. And and again, the furniture ranged from kind of pre 60s and 70s, so that again, nothing exists in a vacuum, right? You don't have your house, you don't have every element of your piece of furniture from the same period or style. So we made it a little eclectic, and also really got into like the chenille bedspreads and Daisy's little bikini clothes all over the room, and she was a bit of a hot mess at that point. So we had to reflect that in the hotel room. So the furnishings were more down and out, um, and but she was drunk and high a lot of the time, I think, at that period. So we had to reflect that in the dressing of the hotel room. Which we look at her room, it's a complete mess, and there are beer bottles and liquor bottles everywhere and clothes everywhere, and um, it was interesting because what we do is when we dress the set, we make it up as the bed made and everything kind of neat at first, because there are some stages where you go back and forth and then photograph it like that, and then just come in like a hurricane and completely mess it up, and lay on the bed so that the pillows look like they've been laid in, and pull the bedspreads up, and the carpeting is got some burn marks in it from cigarettes and things like that. It was fun. Also, I enjoy my job. um, but yeah, and also a little thing, and I don't think it's noticed in the show itself, but Daisy basically has a turntable and vinyl in every hotel room she goes to. So somewhere in every hotel room in the corner, you would see a turntable. And that was kind of fun to do as well, because there was also a progression, right, of what those turntables looked like during the
Hmm.
years, both in style and then also in value, in material value. Uh,
Hmm. It's an interesting
yeah,
detail.
pardon?
That's an interesting detail.
Yeah, and it's those little things, honestly, that as set decorators we slip in, or sometimes it's requested. But when I dress a set, and most set decorators dress a set, you have a vision in your head, you have a storyline, even if it's not, something that has been given to you, but it's a storyline in your head where there's a backstory. And like, okay, if I was Daisy and I was 18 and I was behaving like this, like what would be in my host in my room? How would it look, and so oftentimes there are little details that are very barely noticed by the audience, and sometimes even, the director or people that come on set. But they mean a lot to us, those little details, because they tell a story. So you'll find that when we decorate sets, it's not just about the furnishings, it's about the character of the set and what you want to evoke in the audience, and also reflecting the character that's inhabiting that space. And you will, even if you don't see it and you're not going to see it, we will decorate it down to the tiniest little details so that set looks real. And if they happen to pan the camera that way, what's sitting on that table is a 1975 vase with flowers in it. It's not a bare desk, and it's layered.
Mm.
And that is a huge part of our job, is just making sure that things look real and tell a story.
Hmm. Well, okay, so when you use the term tell a story, the what comes to mind for that is Marlene Dunn's house, which is a space that I mean, so first of all, it's in Pittsburgh. We hear that what we see on screen is some bedrooms, a backyard. We see like a sitting or sunroom area. I don't know what you would call that.
Yeah.
But the bit of dialogue that we get that tells me the story is that Graham and Billy bought the house for Marlene once they had had success, and so they weren't even able to visit that part of town that she now had a house in when they were younger, because that's
Right.
how like different a station she has in life now. So for me, it just there's such a story even just within that space about the band. So when you were working on this, what went into that for you?
Oh, again, one of my favorite sets. A lot. We did so much research, and you also, when it's a character set, it is something that you really put a lot of time into. There are some sets, like again, some of the hotel sets where you're only going to see a bit, and you can decorate that like one, two, three. You know what you're doing. But when it's a character space, there's a lot of research and a lot of thought that goes into it. And I loved doing Marlene Dunn's house because, again, like you say, she was, it was a newer house, and we researched really quintessential furnishings where, the drapery was, sorry, there was a room that I really wanted to do drapery in, and I couldn't because this was on location. But we chose items that were in, middle class, middle America homes, like the items you bought out of a Sears Roebuck catalog. So we found, and it was an interesting time as well, because I hadn't had time to prepare for this in Los Angeles, and it was a big set. And it was the living room and Daisy's, the two rooms that Daisy and Billy stay in, sorry, the couples. And as you say, the outside porch where you see them almost kissing. And then there was the party outside that she throws when they come home. So it was an enormous dress. And we wanted it to look like, a home in Pennsylvania, nothing like Los Angeles, something that she, bought in a catalog. And so we found these incredible items in New Orleans and Atlanta. This is not a set, just as an aside. Um, there were so many things that we wouldn't have been able to find in New Orleans in this period. So I packed a truckload, a 40-foot trailer or two from Los Angeles, filled with set dressing items that I just knew I would not find in New Orleans, which is just the basis of LA. The infrastructure we have is incredible. But for Marlene's house, I knew I could find that anywhere. And so and we, it was this it was this very upper class house, and it had really beautiful hardwood floors that were finished, and it had all this molding in it that was very non 70s. Like there's no, moldings around windows and chair rails in the 70s. So we had to disguise a lot of it. There was an enormous white bookcase in the living room that basically had to be painted, and they didn't want us to paint it. So, we have lovely techniques, and I'm sure if you speak to Jess Kender, the production designer, she'll tell you more about it. But I mean, like, there's ways of painting paper and attaching it to this bookshelf so it'll come off nicely and you don't ruin the bookshelf underneath it, because these people were particularly precious about their house, and we weren't allowed to screw into the walls in certain areas, so very hard to hang drapery, for example. But everything we found was specific to middle class, but a nice middle class home. And we spent a long time on that house researching it and dressing it. I think it took us 5 days to dress. Oh, that was the house, incidentally, where some of our exterior furniture got carried away in the tornado. Um, so it's, and again, went into detail. There were photographs all over the place, family photographs that were, the 3 by 3 um, photos from the 70s. And in a lot of those ways, we're, everything we use on a set, if it's a piece of art, a photograph, or everything, has to be cleared. Basically, you cannot use any piece that has been you know any piece that has been manufactured or drawn or photographed without having permission. And it's like, when a photograph, you've got to have a permission from the photographer and the people in the photograph, and those are tough to come by. So I had a ton of family photographs from the 70s when I was a kid. So I just printed a bunch of them out, and those were the items that I, put in the photo frames in Marlene Dunn's house. I mean, of course, there were pictures of Billy and Graham when they were kids as well, and photographs of Billy, Camilla, and their child. But there was that kind of detail in there, and then in the end we ended up really not seeing anything of that house except the enclosed patio, which we had made into, we used a lot of rattan in there, and beautiful, like, tropical rattan chairs and a solid sofa, and we just made that into a really cool space, which I assume is why they decided to shoot there. And it was also the exterior, and that's all you saw. And so I was really bummed
I
when I
mean,
saw
but
it.
there's so much love in that house. And I do think it comes across, even though we didn't get to see all the spaces that you worked on. I think something about that space feels very like warm and fuzzy to me. And I think part of it is knowing Marlene had a kind of hard life, and like this is a really aspirational thing for her. And like, her kids made it, and so she's made it. And there's just something about that makes you feel a certain way about those scenes. And I
Yeah,
think that's reflected in the set dressing, even though we didn't get to see everything you worked on. I
yeah,
I know if you have a little bit more time, there is another space I'd like to ask about. The SNL shows, the
Yeah.
SNL show. I know that
Mhm.
you maybe worked on more than we saw for that as well. What work did you do for this?
This was one of the parts where like, I knew we weren't going to find dollies and cameras and certain equipment, camera equipment in New Orleans. So again, we have this incredible prop house in Los Angeles called History for Hire, and they are amazing. They've been going for a very long time. You can go in and do your research there, but they have film equipment from many different periods. So I basically loaded the truck with a sound boom, which back in those days was on those sets were attached to a dolly, and a camera on a dolly, and all the lighting, and all the those tech kind of pieces of equipment, that there was just no way we'd find them in New Orleans. So I kind of got saved on that aspect, and we did a lot of research again on Saturday Night Live in that period, and like the set, which didn't change much, and we had these little vignettes on the sides, which I don't think we really saw, but one little vignette was their newsroom, how they do their skits, right? So not only, so we had the stage where they were playing on, and then in the audience, surrounding the audience, we had these little vignette sets, which they cut to in real Saturday Night Live and perform their skits there. And Saturday Night Live also has these really specific chairs, really specific audience chairs, and we looked for those, and they still use them. I mean, and they've had them forever. So, I mean, I was really wanting to go into the studio and grab them, but that wasn't not allowed. So we found something that looked very similar, and I think we pulled it off actually. We got the wood tone right, but I would have really loved to have gotten the real chairs from SNL. And then we also decorated the backstage, which I think you see a moment of God, sorry, I can't remember the characters. You might have to. They speak behind there, and you might see a piece of set dressing in the background. But when we did the research of Saturday Night Live backstage, I found this incredible aerial shot of the studio, and in it, I mean, there were sections, and they had makeup section, and they had the costume section, and they had mannequins in there that they had dressed, that were dressed in costumes, and then all sorts of their ridiculous skit props. So we had like a giant telephone booth, and a horse, and just silly backstage set dressing items that would have been there that they would use in their skits. And you see very little of it, but it was an enormous space. And I just loved, also we did so much detail dressing. Even all the makeup stations were dressed out completely. They had all the makeup, they had head forms with wigs, and we had hairbrushes and hair. I mean, they were just, everything was done right to the last detail. And so, if anything, we take pride and get excited about those things, even if you don't see them. But it's just, that is part of our job. And even though we didn't see much of it, still, it was wonderful to dress. It was wonderful to research. It was difficult to find some items, but all in all, it came together. So I wish we had a behind the scenes, really. But of course, as set decorators, we take photos of the sets, because we know that you know we dress more than you're going to see.
Well, I guess that's what these interviews are for. I mean, I have just loved having this conversation with you because I think the love and the passion that you had for the show and the amount of love that goes into the details of every single department on set is really coming across here. And I think it can only make people love the show even more, even if we didn't see all of the things that you worked on. Just to know that that amount of care was put in means a lot. As we wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to share about your work on this show that I didn't ask the question about? You just want to make sure we know about it?
Um, it was, I don't know if I should say this, but it was one of the toughest shows I've ever worked on. And again, because we were coming out of COVID, we had so many schedule changes and we had people getting sick and we were losing locations. And so it was very hard. It was difficult to keep up. Um, but, as in all projects, like there's something about set decorating, and I think most people feel in this business is that it has a certain addiction, right? There's a challenge and you have to meet that challenge. There's no kind of like, oh, well, it didn't arrive, sorry. Like everything has to be there. It doesn't matter what. I mean, even if you have to go and fabricate it in your backyard, which you shouldn't do. But but the all the crises that happen during the process, and all the like you pulling your hair out, and us being behind schedule and all of that uh all goes away. You've reached this mountain of challenge, and then on one set, and then you go to another set, and that's a challenge, and then you see the final product, and it's all worth it. You forget all those things that happened, and you just see, and you're like, wow, okay, this actually turned out okay. I didn't have enough research. I could have done more. I didn't have as much prep time as I wanted to, but it looks good. It's okay. It'll pass. Just kidding.
No,
So
I mean, it certainly sounds like it was kind of a grueling schedule, kind of. It was a grueling schedule, and there was so many locations, so many sets, so much decoration to do.
yeah.
You all basically made 10 movies, short movies, and
Oh,
to do this limited series, but it's just incredible the work that you did. I know it's been an incredibly unusual and challenging time in your industry for quite a few years now. So I'll give this last question in a few different ways, and you can answer whichever part of it you want.
okay.
Is there anything you're working on now that you want to share, or anything you've worked on recently you want to draw our attention to, or any project you want to shout out in general?
Honestly, things are really bad in Los Angeles right now, as I don't know if anybody knows, but they are really bad. And so a lot of people aren't working. So there are some projects that are going on, but they tend to be the lower, smaller budgets and reality shows. And, the experienced people aren't being hired for whatever reason. They cost too much. I don't know. So and it becomes very competitive, and there's so many people unemployed. It's incredibly sad. So I have tried to kind of maintain, because this business has always been freelance. You have your up times, you have your down times. Like in the last few years, I actually managed to kind of get over that hump where I knew I would always have work. And I think that was the biggest mistake you could actually make, because I had this assumption that, here we were working on amazing things and this would just go on. And then it dropped out, stopped. Like people have lost their livelihoods. We've lost our profession. So I'm not currently working in the film industry. The last show that I did was last year, which I was one of the lucky ones because some people haven't worked in 3 years. Was a little show for HBO called Bookie, which was a Chuck Lorre comedy on HBO. And that was a fun show, actually. And it was a nice re-entrance for me in the industry after I did Daisy Jones. because it was just so much more mellow and easier to do. We still did big sets, but there was a 5 month show. Uh, Unfortunately, we were all banking or hoping that it would continue for another season, but they cancelled it. So now we're just trying to keep alive, and do side jobs and just things that because we're used to waiting, right? We're used to saying waiting between jobs, and you save a certain amount of money because there might be a big gap between jobs, but this gap is interminable. Um, and so, you know, banking on the fact that you will work again has become kind of an illusion right now, and it's pretty sad. And I miss this work so much. It's just one of those things that you can be completely creative, and you work with different people all the time, and you work in different environments, and you create different environments, and it kind of becomes part of your heart or your soul, and then like it's gone. And I don't want to sound really like a downer, but it's been a struggle for a lot of people in this town, and a lot of people have lost their savings and their houses and have had to move on. um so yeah, the last thing I worked on was Bookie, which was last year, and now I'm just doing side jobs and hoping it'll come back, you know, but not sitting around and hoping, like actually having to go out and make a living while hoping it'll come back and I can do the thing that I love to do again.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your honesty and your transparency on that. And you're not alone in sharing that in these interviews. I think there are a lot of really skilled people out there who it's been hard. It's been a hard time. And, hopefully people will check out Bookie, the season that you did. And but hopefully this also serves as a way for people to really recognize the work that your team, that is Set Decorator, and that all of the skilled people on these shows are doing. Because those skills are transferable, I'm sure, in other ways as well. But it's just a matter of it's amazing how much like you have a creative job, but the amount of project management
Oh
and
yeah.
linear thinking that you have to do, not everybody has all of those things rolled up into one person. And, to be able to tell these beautiful stories about how the rooms looked, but then to also share, and here's how we made it happen anyway after a tornado ripped apart, part of the
Yeah,
venue, like it takes a lot of different sides of your brain to be
it,
able to make it happen.
it does. And I hope Lisa mentioned the management side of the job more, because that is a whole another aspect that is half your job. So like we all like to focus in on the creative stuff and what's fun, but there's also budgets and script rewrites and chats with producers, and we want to cut this and we want to cut that, and then the DP wants this but we can't afford it. I do want to say that working on a film set is a collaboration. It's a collaborative. You spend time with these people, they become like your family, and you work together to make a beautiful product with everybody, lighting, grips, director, photography, everybody. Which is also an amazing aspect. It's a great environment to work in.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much, Andy, for taking all this time to share the work that you did on this show. I think that this could only give people a greater appreciation when they go back and do their next rewatch. So, thank you for all this time that you've taken.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me on.
And to everybody who's watching this, thank you for watching and go out there. Don't be the muse, be the somebody. Bye, everybody.